We're happy that God has given us the opportunity once again to study a portion of his word. Let's turn to Ruth chapter 4. We're in, do we have any books or Bibles in the back? Books or Bibles in that blue bag? I think there's one or two books left. Books in that blue or purple bag. And then also, thank you, sister. Also on the cart, there may be there may be one or two books on the cart. This is the last week we're in this book. We're going to transition into the next section next week. We're on lesson 13. Last week we didn't really get enough time to go over this, so we'll double back. In our book, page 23, lesson 13, we're between chapter 4, 1 through 22, the marriage of Ruth to Boaz. Just as a refresher, we'll reread some of these verses in chapter 4. The first 12 verses, if you remember, is a back and forth with Boaz with this near kinsman to Ruth to see if he would take the responsibility of having Ruth as his wife. Some reference scriptures for that on why they're doing what they're doing comes from Leviticus chapter 25, as well as Deuteronomy chapter 25. Thank you. Just as reference to what they're doing, taking off the shoe and all those sort of things are coming from tradition in terms of Old Testament. People, we have different things. People used to do blood brothers where they'll cut some blood and do like this. People do spit oaths. There's different things that different cultures do in tradition for oaths or things like that. Then when we transition into verse 12, actually, someone read for us verse 11 through 16. Ruth chapter 4, 11 through 16. And then someone get ready to read 17 through 22. We'll use those as our recap verses. 11 through 16, and then 17 through 22.
Then the elders and all the people at the gate said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the family of Israel. May you have Stanley and Ellis and be famous in Bethlehem. Through the offspring the Lord gives you like a small woman. May your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. So Boaz to Ruth, and she became his wife. When he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The woman said to Naomi, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better than you to you than 7 sons, has given him birth." Then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him.
Great. Oh, sorry. 17 through 22. If no one else reads it, you can read it.
The woman living there said, "Naomi had a son, and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David, the genealogy of David. This then is the family line of Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram, Ram the father of Aminadab, Aminadab the father of Nashon, Nashon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, Boaz the father of Obed, Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David."
Thanks. What's your version? What version Bible you have? It's good to hear. It's good to hear. We speak in this begotten, but that's really a biblical scriptural term. But it's good to hear the reading in father, because that's what more modern day vernacular is, right? People don't go around speaking begot in the worldly sector unless you're talking about spiritual things. So his version is talking about father, right? So let's go back a couple of NIV. Good. Okay. Yeah, that's good. So it was good to hear that, because last week we read it in New King James and King James. So it's good that this week we read it in NIV. Perfect. Let's go back to see kind of where we have this verse 11 and 12 is like a prophecy, like a wishing, like a tidings of good cheer, a blessing. And it really comes true because they're talking about the blessing of Ruth and Naomi and how they would hope they're going to play out in the history. And it really comes to pass because Ruth is the great grandmother of David, great grandmother, right? So not mother, not grandmother, but great grandmother of David. And then Ruth's and Boaz's son is, what's his name? Starts with an O. Obed, right? Let's go to Matthew chapter 1. Matthew chapter 1. Somebody read for us verses 1 through 6. Matthew 1, 1 through 6. Let's see why this genealogy is a big deal. Matthew 1, 1 through 6.
The book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham begot Isaac, and Isaac begot Jacob, and Jacob begot Judah and his brethren. And Judah begot Perez and Zara of Tamar, and Perez begot Ezron, and Ezron begot Aram, and Aram begot Aminadab, and Aminadab begot Messiah, and Messiah begot Solomon, and Solomon begot Ruth of Rahab, and Ruth begot Obed of Ruth, and Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David the king, and the king begot Solomon of her that he got, that had been the wife of Uriah.
All right, good. All right, let's do this count. Let's count here. Because when we start with Abraham, the reason why I started with Abraham, we know that it restarted the world after the flood with Noah. And if you go back into this was years ago when we were looking at the study of Abraham part, that Noah, because he lived so long, their lives overlapped with Abram before Abraham and Noah's kids, because these people were living a long time. But let's count how many people from Abraham, right? Like in terms of genealogy. I don't want to get into great, because I don't know, but let's see the number. I think it's around 11, but let's confirm. So let's start with Abraham. We're not going to start with Noah, just for the sake of consistency of what Matthew is talking about. So in verse 2, it starts with Abraham. That's one, right? Abraham is the father of Isaac. Isaac has Jacob, right? That's 3 already. So we have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Somebody make sure we're keeping count correctly, right? So that's 3. Then Jacob has Judah and his brothers, right? The reason why it's not mentioning the other 11 is because it's showing you the lineage of Jesus, which comes from the tribe of Judah. This is like Bible trivia, right? So Jesus comes from the lineage of Judah, right? So we got Abraham 1, Isaac is 2, Jacob is 3, Judah is 4. Judah is the father of Perez, 5, and Zerah by Tamar, right? Tamar is a woman. Perez is the father of Hezron, 6. Hezron is the father of Ram. Now, verse 3 is a little bit confusing, so let's break this down. Judah is the father of Perez and Zerah by Tamar. And Perez, so we're going to leave Zerah, is the father of Hezron. See? So it's almost like the same as in 2, where it's mentioning Judah and his brother. So we got Abraham is 1, Isaac is 2, Jacob is 3, Judah is 4, Perez is 5, Hezron is 6. Hezron is the father of Ram, is 7. Ram is the father of Aminadab, that's 8. Aminadab is the father of Nahshon, that's 9. Nahshon is the father of Salmon, that's 10. Salmon or Salmon is the father of Boaz, that's 11. And Boaz is the husband of Rahab. Do we do math right? Let's just double check. Right? So now we just have 11 generations from Abraham. Right? So Boaz, we see that his lineage is coming from Judah because he's in the lineage of Jesus Christ. Right? And then we have, let's go before we get to, oh, yes, here's what I wanted to say. So when we get to 11 for genealogy, remember we were making a big deal. A couple of people had comments about Boaz's character and how he treated women and interacted with women. I think somebody even had a contrast to Samson, right? Samson was a womanizer. The way he interacted with women was completely different than Boaz. But in Matthew chapter 1, who is Boaz's mom? Matthew chapter 1, verse 5. Who's Rahab in our biblical study? Right? Rahab, her Indeed.com or LinkedIn profile will say her job profession was what? Prostitute. Right? So remember we were talking about, somebody had a comment to say like, man, Boaz, maybe he was raised something with his mom, or maybe he had a special relationship, or he was raised by several women in his life. But whatever it was, he looked at women different, right? So let's go back, verse 5. Salmon or Salmon is the father of Boaz by way of Rahab. Now, Rahab was a prostitute. Let's quickly recap. What's the scenario with her? Is she an Israelite, or is she from somewhere else? Somewhere else. What city is she from? Jericho. Remember the trumpets and all the thing and the scarlet hanging out the window, right? So the whole point was she basically hid these spies who were Israelite spies, right? And then said, hey, when you go back and you come back and God's going to come with you because I heard about you, just look out for me, in my household, right? So God blessed them. Remember when they came down, they marched around, they blew the trumpets on the what day? 7th day. Walls come tumbling down, they take over the city, right? So Rahab in that scenario is highly favored. She's blessed, but she takes an about face, right? She basically leaves whatever her nationality, ethnicity, culture was, and then comes into Israelite culture and religion, right? And she becomes a wife and has kids. We referenced that long time ago. I don't even know what chapter that was actually, where we talked about Rahab, but it feels like it was a long time ago. Now we see from Matthew's genealogy that Boaz is older in our story, right? An older man. Remember we said he could have got married probably 100 times because he was wealthy. He was a kind guy. He was a godly man, right? So he had a lot of the attributes that in this culture here, he would be a high catch. I don't know, some of these attributes besides the wealth, maybe people may not care about too much in modern times, but in his day and age, he's like one of the probably most eligible bachelors. And we looked at when Ruth was gleaming, he noticed her, right? He's rich. He noticed her. He let her come in, gave her some extra food. And then for the whole harvest, he let her not glean, just take the leftovers, but come reap with the other reapers. Then even when she came into the room trying to do this whole marriage proposal thing, remember he was like, don't leave. Don't tell anyone that you are here. People think the wrong thing. You have a near kinsman that's closer than me. I'll go out and see if this young man will fulfill the duties. But thank you so much for coming to me, because everyone heard about how virtuous you are. You could have went to anyone, young or old, right? So we see that character-wise, where his mom was a prostitute. Now, people view their dads and grandfathers put to the side. People view most of the time their mother and their grandmother in a very special way, right? Because a womb is the housing of life, right? So a child's bond with their mother and their grandmother is different than their father or their grandfather, right? So I always say is that people view their grandmother, especially like Southern, right? Southern Black culture, the grandmother is like the matriarch before the mother. Because a lot of times when you get past into the 80s, into the 90s, right, and the breakdown of homes in inner city, the grandmother really raised her kids and the grandkids because of drugs and alcohol and incarceration and all those sort of things. So these are cultural things, right? So it's different. Each culture is different, right? In Black Southern culture, grandmother is matriarch, right? She basically is the one that instills the teachings, both worldly teachings and spiritual teaching. So people view their grandmother and their mother in a very, very, very specific way. Some people's mother could be strung out on drugs and they still will view their mother in high regard. You view them how you were introduced to them, but you don't know what life they lived up into the point where you met your mother and your grandmother when you first opened your eyes. Your mother and your grandmother lived a whole life before you. Now, if you could start seeing what your grandmother and mother did when they were younger, it probably blow your mind. I feel bad for people now because you're going to be able to reference what your mother and grandmother did on social media. You're going to be able to scroll and search and see what your grandmother and mother was doing, right? Because that's going to break your heart, because you're going to see them posting pictures probably with half amount of clothes or no clothes on. You're going to be like, what in the world? Because remember, when you a mother and a grandmother, you can put those things of your past to the side in previous generations. Modern times, even if you delete a picture, it's never deleted. Once something is uploaded on the internet, it literally is somewhere, right? So this is just the hazards of our new generation. But anyway, when you look at the way that this young man was raised, if you were to say, well, someone just came into the Bible study the last month or month and a half, and we were talking about Boaz, and they never knew anything about our other studies, never heard Rahab or anything, and we said, what kind of mother you think Boaz had? I guarantee you most people would have the same comments that we had, right? Oh, she probably was a nice lady, God-fearing lady, and still some things in him. But probably the bottom of the list, if anyone at most, would say that she was a prostitute, right? Because probably wouldn't equate God-fearing and prostitute with the same. When you sin a lot, you appreciate different. Like people who are in the street, Jesus's ministry was street ministry. Some of us in here, Jesus, you never would have been interacting with Jesus when he was walking and talking, because Jesus was in the street. Jesus wasn't in the suburbs. Suburb people kicked Jesus out. When Jesus was going to the street people responded because the Pharisees, Sadducees, and priests didn't interact with them, right? So even though they believed God, they were just on the outskirts, right? Jesus was walking through the crowd. Now, to walk through the crowd as a religious person, remember, there's no separation of church and state. So to be a religious and political figure and walk through the crowd is unheard of. It's no different than when you go to a concert. Where is the celebrity standing? On a stage. When they jump into the crowd, security lose their mind, right? Because now I can't control the situation. When you're on the stage, security can control, right? But sometimes the singer jump into the crowd, right? It's no different politicians. Sometimes politicians stand at the podium, then other times they start walking in the crowd. Secret Service goes ballistic because now they're going to lose control of the situation. So what Jesus was doing was very unnatural because he was a celebrity, a political figure, and a religious figure, right? That's a big deal. So when my point is, a lot of the people that Jesus was interacting with have lifestyles very similar to Rahab. One of which is when he was drawing on the ground and he said, whoever doesn't have sin, cast the first stone. What did they catch that woman in the act of? Right? So basically, she was committing sin too sexual, right? So these things are always around, right? These are big deals. The world say prostitution is the oldest profession. It's like a joke that people say. When you go through a lot, those people usually have a lot of conviction. The problem, though, is they have baggage, so it makes some of us uncomfortable. But when you come from nothing and somebody says, hey, there's a God that died for you, that's going to mean more to you than if you come from already. Like, because you're going to view it as a lot of the things that Jesus is talking about freeing you from or giving you. If you already have, you're going to say, what? I already have that. Right? Like if you already have nice house, nice clothes, Revelation, it's just to be honest, if you already have gold and diamonds and they're saying, oh, the streets of gold, you thinking, I mean, that's cute, but I mean, I go in my house, I could see plenty gold. I could put watches and necklaces and chains and medallions on the ground and walk on them because you blessed. But if you homeless and somebody say, hey, when you die, you could go to a place that's streets of gold, how would you respond to that? Right? So if you're a prostitute and people literally only use you physically and demean you, and somebody comes around and says, hey, I died for you, what would that mean differently than if you were the wife of a Pharisee or a Sadducee, right? So we got to look at these things for what it is. Now, for our story, it's important to highlight that Boaz's mom, even though of what her previous profession was, she raised a God-fearing child. Because I'm telling you, a lot of times is when you go through something, you try to instill that into your children as the opposite if you're a good parent. Most of the time today, people try to instill the things that they couldn't do physically. I wasn't a cheerleader, now you should be a cheerleader, right? I wasn't on the basketball team, now you should be on the basketball team. I didn't finish college, so now you should finish college. All those things are fine in its place. But very rarely, because I've been Christian long time, so I've seen a lot of parents. I hear a lot of parents during Bible study. Very rarely have I ever heard somebody say, I'm not a strong Christian, so I want my child to be a strong Christian. I hear parents telling me all the things they want their kid to be in the whole world. But very rarely do I hear somebody making a testimony saying, I was a prostitute and I want to raise a God-fearing son, because I would have remembered that in a Bible study, because that's something you don't forget. So she made a complete 180 in her household. That's what I was alluding to last week in terms of spiritual genealogy. When you're the first convert in your family, you're able to set up a spiritual genealogy. Like when we talk about the Bell family have a spiritual genealogy. Some of us in this room is a first-time Christian. So you live a different life than Sister Shirley. You should ask Sister Shirley, hey, what is it like to have spiritual genealogy where you can not only reference yourself, but people that's older than you that were already baptized? Because that's a big deal. Don't minimize that. Because if you don't have that in your family, you're thinking that's what's the big deal? That is a very, very big deal. Just like generational wealth is a big deal, right? It's a difference between first person who have money and you come from generations of families who have money. Is that not a difference? Yes, it's a difference between you the first one in your family that graduated college, and you can reference your grandmother or great-grandmother that graduated college. You start off as a jump start if the family behind you already paved the way financially or educationally. Same thing spiritually, because you're raised in a different environment, right? This is why we have to do better of taking down our egos in parenting and establishing families and husbands and wives, and reach out to others in the congregation, because you never was a mother until you first had your child, or a husband or a wife or a father until you first. But there's people that can say, oh, I had that 2-3 generations ago. So therefore they have advice. These things matter in who you are, because you are a product of your environment, regardless if you want to be or not. That's why I said if I took people from Trumbull and Fairfield and moved them to Bridgeport and left them there for a generation, they would be the same. Has nothing to do with color. It has everything to do with social economics and area and proximity. Because if I take away your resources and I put you somewhere for a generation, the same statistics would happen, because you're a product of your environment. If I take a boy from Kansas out of the womb and bring him to Harlem, and took a boy from Harlem and bring him to Kansas, the Kansas boy growing up is, when he get a teenager, gonna like hip hop music, and the Harlem boy growing up gonna like country music. The Kansas boy not gonna grow up and be like, oh, something in me feel like I should always like country music. Then they find out, oh, that's why, because I was from Kansas this whole time and didn't know it, right? Don't work like that. The Jungle Book, Mowgli thought he was what? An animal, right? I'm a wolf like the other wolf. No, you a boy. What's that? You're a product of your environment, good or bad. That's why I say all the time is, as parents, even if your children aren't saved when they leave the house, even if you have a contentious relationship with them, trust me, they still appreciate how you were raised. They may never give you the courtesy to tell you that, but they can see when you go out into the world, it's a difference how I was raised and how other kids was raised. That's why I'm saying, as a charge from someone who is from a child's point of view, not married. Married people always hearing advice from other married people. Listen to advice from me as a child, that children see everything you do. If you smoke, I want to smoke, right? If you swear, I want to swear. If you late all the time, I'm late all the time. So you have to make a 180 of your life in order to raise me different than how you're raised. Some people say, I'm going to break the generational cycle of poverty in my family. I'm going to graduate high school. I'm going to graduate college. I'm going to go out, get a good job. And they achieve those things. You know how they achieve those things? With blinders on. Because if they allow their family to influence them, what family say? First of all, when it's time to go to college, what family gonna say, oh, don't go way out there. You're gonna be homesick. People ain't gonna treat you right. Don't. Family wants you to be close. Right? This is facts. Family don't want you to go and better yourself sometimes because it's the unknown. Family don't even want you to move. Right? But they're gonna say, oh, ain't gonna be no people there, ain't gonna be no internet there, no church there, no laundry, no electricity, like we living in the 1800s, because it's fear. So when we look at those things, in order to be great, even in our family financially, sometimes we got to put blinders on. Spiritually is even more. In order to raise a child different, I'm talking to people who are first generation Christians, different than the way you're raised, you would first have to work on you to consciously not expose your child to the things that you were exposed to, right? You start thinking, some of us here can say, I grew up way too fast. You can remember as I was in the street, I raised myself. I was already watching our movies and listening to songs with swear words. And so you're going to think that impacts you today. It does. Even if you're a Christian, you're going to look at life very different. Some of us live sheltered. Some of us say, oh, I didn't really get to do whatever I wanted to do until I was out on my own. The people who grew up on their own at a young age, they will call you blessed. But you would say what? Oh, I had strict parents. But if somebody grew up on the street, they're going to say what? I wish I had even one strict parent. One parent that cared where I was at. Right? But at the time, when you have parents wondering where you are, leave your door open, come home at a certain time, do the chores, what do the kids say? Wow, thanks, mom and dad, for, being great parents. What they say? No, I want to run away. Right? They don't appreciate it. But if you looking at a kid that's always at your house, the child don't understand this. But as an adult, you know why that child always at your house and not at their own house. Because why? Their parents don't have a loving environment for them. And even as a kid, they can see the difference between their house and their friend's house. So they want to go to the friend's house. That's how Christians be raising the whole street over there. So these are the things that we look at from this story, because that comes from Rahab. Rahab was a prostitute. And don't think that when she became a proselyte, which means she converted to this Israelite culture and Hebrew culture and religion, that the other women weren't murmuring that she was a prostitute. Because that don't sit well with women. Men is a double standard. Men can sleep with 1,000 people and it won't have the same negative connotation. But women in the church, oh my goodness. Right? If somebody found out that you slept with 2 men, they're going to say what? Ooh, harlot. So imagine if as a profession that somebody converted, if somebody came in here and everybody knew, oh, I used to see her, outside, and now she in here. As holy as y'all are, as much as hug your neighbor as you are, some of you still would be murmuring, she used to be outside. In modern times, we call that a lady of the night. People say, oh, she was a lady of the night. That'll murmur quick, because people are people. So how did she raise Boaz as a prostitute? See, some of us didn't have profession as prostitute, and we still can't produce a Boaz. You know why? Because being a parent is very hard. Having a child is easy. God do all the hard work of producing life, but not doing what you want to do to expose your child to better is very difficult. It's difficult financially. You have to make a financial sacrifice. It's difficult spiritually. You got to make a spiritual sacrifice. And it's difficult emotionally. Good parents got to make an emotional sacrifice because you're taking care of another soul. But see, people don't tell kids that. That's how kids have kids, because they don't warn them of the work If kids understood the work it was to have a child, you wouldn't need contraceptive. Because you know why? People say, what? I'm not trying to have no child. Child is work. But people treat children now like a handbag. I want one of those. Or a hat. I want one of those. Right? Because handbag, what? I could wear where I could put a hand at. That down. I could switch colors and do it. But do a child work that way? No. Because when you out, who's taking care of your child? That's why I said, but the grandmother back in, because usually you say, what? I need a fella's night. I need a ladies' night. And where do you give the child to? The grandmother. Here, you raise them a second time. But see, you making sacrifice as a mom or dad. Maybe you can't have no ladies' night or a fella's trip because you too busy being a mom or a father. I have friends that I had to tell, hey, man, stop calling me. Because you're a father. Am I a father? No. So then Friday night, I could be anywhere. But guess where you should be? Wherever your child is, because God forbid your child open their eyes and you're not there. You with me. Then I can't have fun because I'm busy worrying about who raising your kid. So when you look at Boaz, man, that's a good catch. Think of Rahab. That took a lot of work to raise a Boaz. It takes work to be a good parent. Parents throw up their hands and be like, oh, this kid just gonna be the way that's easy. Sorry, it's easy to be, oh, I don't want to fight, so I'm gonna just let the kid be whatever. If you let a kid be whatever they're gonna be, guess what they're gonna be? Bad. Bad, bad, bad. If you don't tell me to wash the dishes, I'm never washing dishes, ever. I'm never going to wake up one day and be like, you know what? Mom worked real hard. I think I'm going to wash the dishes. Never. Never am I washing the dishes. Never am I taking the garbage out unless someone makes me. You have to make a child be better. If you let a child pick, what they're going to pick for dinner? Ice cream or McDonald's? You can't. Oh, you know, I got to take into account what my kid want to eat. I told this story before. I had a friend, he had a son. He said, hey, I'm out. Can you pick up my son from school? Picked up the son from school. He was maybe, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years old. Took him to go get pizza. And the server came over and we ordered pizza for the table because it was me, the boy, and our other friends. After the server leave, the boy said, nobody asked me what I want to eat. So I said, when the server, after we eat, give the bill, do you have money? He said, no. So then I'll pick because I'm an adult. What I look like asking a child who don't have money, hey, man, what you want to eat? First of all, I was a kid, so I know what kids want to eat. They want cheese or pepperoni pizza. So guess what I ordered? A cheese and a pepperoni pizza. So why I got to consult with the kid that's a quarter of my size? What do they want to eat? They don't have money. What I look like picking him up and taking him to ice cream, he get a stomach ache, and then I got to answer to who? His father, who expected me as an adult to say, even though you don't have kids, I would hope that you wouldn't let my son just eat anything. So I hear people, kids throwing stuff on the floor, wallowing all over the place. Oh, you know, can we get this? People are switching their mindset from being a good parent. Being a parent, anybody can do that. Anybody with reproduction system can be a parent. But being a good parent is very, very hard. And it's not as many good parents out there as people want to believe there is on Mother's Day and Father's Day. A lot of Father's Day and Mother's Day cards make it seem like everyone is a good mom and everyone is a good dad. But is that true? No, because some of us don't want to make the sacrifice to have a past like Rahab and raise a Boaz. That's very difficult. Imagine holding your son's hand and walking past somebody whispering or laughing at who you used to be. See how difficult that would be? Look, that's why I said some people, their mother can be addicted to drugs and they still hold them in a high regard because how they were raised. That's why I'm saying culturally. That's why I mentioned some things like Black or Southern black, because not every culture view parents the same way. Sorry. Not every culture view mothers and grandmothers the same way. Some cultures, I can't speak for other culture because I'm not another culture. But as American, I see a lot of culture, and sometimes I'll be like, because in my culture, it don't matter if your mother or grandmother literally can be strung out high talking to you, and still you gotta what? Honor your mother and honor your father. Some culture, you only honor and mother and honor father if you agree with them. But that's not my culture. I wasn't raised like that. I was raised, you gotta honor them even if you don't agree with them. But see, that's different culture. So Boaz had a view of family different than some other men may have had. And therefore, when you match Boaz and you match Ruth, and both of them have such a spiritual reputation, look at how they were raised though. That's why I wanted to circle back on this week to give people a chance to give comments and talk about this aspect of family, because this family layer produced Boaz and Ruth. And when you look at who Boaz was in terms of his genealogy before him, and then ending up in the genealogy of Jesus, is so important. And then even look in this Matthew chapter 1, Solomon's mom was who? His father was David, but who was Solomon's mom in verse 6? So Solomon was a product of what? Rape. Solomon was a product of rape. That's a hot cultural topic, right? Don't people argue about abortion and say what? What if somebody is raped? Right? That's a touchy topic. Some things are touchy. I love how Christians are so black and white in Bible study. It's easy in Bible study to say what you believe in not, but go into the street where people are. And then you talk to some rape victims. Now tell me what Bible verse you're going to use. Because if you start telling me about sanctity of life, you wrong. You know what you should tell them about? Solomon. See, Christians always want to yell at somebody on why they're not saved correctly, why they're stop. Tell me about the story of Solomon. Some of us can't even remember how Solomon got here. So, sweetheart, in your womb could literally be the next king, president, solve cancer, solve AIDS. Well, how you feel like that? Look, I can show you people in the Bible that had same start. And you say, wow, you're right. That could be my kid. But I don't hear a lot of Christians online talking that way with love. I hear arguing pro-life, arguing pro-choice. Solomon had something about two people arguing from a distance, and one is a fool and one is a wise person. He said, when the two people arguing from a distance, can you tell which one is fool and which one is wise? No, he said both of them look foolish. And that's how some of us look online, arguing about social and moral issues instead of showing people the Bible. See, not going to really convert that many people with arguing with them, but tell them about the story of Solomon. So just want to open this up towards the end now. Any comments? We're really done with these questions. So this is just in general. Any comments about the story of Ruth, Boaz, family structure, anything? We'll start in the back and work our way up. Yes, sister, go ahead.
Yes. I was finding it very funny when you were talking. You broke it down so clearly about Boaz, because, you know, there's this popular book, God, Where's My Boaz? And the preview of the book, here's what it says. It's time to get the love and relationship God has had waiting for you all along. God, Where's My Boaz? Is a woman's guide to understanding what is hindering her from receiving the love and relationship she truly deserves. So what's funny about that is that nobody ever broke it down to say, who is Boaz? We're getting married to, Rahab is going to be my mother-in-law.
Yeah.
You know
Who
what I mean?
wants
so
that?
I don't think anybody ever thinks about it like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So they have this whole thing about how Boaz, Ruth waited for her Boaz, and every woman should wait on their Boaz, and, you know, you're not doing it right if you don't wait on your Boaz, you know. But thanks for breaking it down, because I put it all in perspective.
And the other thing to that, as a piggyback comment, is church got to raise Boaz, right? You got to raise up some Boaz. When I go through church, right, step on some toes. When I start looking through youth rallies and camp, I see a lot of strong women. And remember, I went to youth rallies and camp, so I can tell you the people who still go to church and the people who don't go to church. And the females outnumber the people that I went to youth rallies and camp with in this New England for more than double. You got to raise some Boaz, right? I mean, where I'm going to get a Boaz from if nobody raised one? So that's a good point. Brother David, and then we'll come Sister Nadine.
Just an observation about the two genealogies you mentioned. Going from Boaz to David. David's not even around yet in this book.
Yeah,
true. A few chapters ahead. So they kind of tell us, and Matthew does the same thing. So there's a few generations in there. So they kind of jumped ahead. Mm-hmm. Maybe to make the sevens work or something.
Yeah, what you mean from to get from Obed to Jesse?
Obed to David. Yeah. Is there more in there?
Yeah, there's more, but in terms of, so this is only following this one family's genealogy, though, right? Like not their brothers and sisters. So yeah, there are people in between here, like family structure, but David's father was Jesse, and Jesse's father was Obed. That's why certain verses in the Bible, you'll hear something like a phrase talking about the root of Jesse, right? Some songs talk about the root of Jesse, and that's what that's referencing. Yes.
Just saying, so we may not be raising some boys, but we do have some boys. I think sometimes we don't know how to identify them because we're looking at physical and not looking at the spiritual. You know, there's a lot of, I think, good men and women who get passed over by the opposite sex because they don't conform to what they're looking for physically or in this world, you know? Yep. They're not looking with the spiritual eyes. And so I think sometimes we need to remember to wear our spiritual glasses when we're looking for our mates.
Yes, and I will piggyback that as also parents. Parents need to put spiritual glasses, right? Because again, I hear a lot of parents telling me about world things. But what about spiritual things? I hear parents telling me about cultural things. Oh, I'm black, so I want my kid to marry someone black. Oh, I'm Asian, I want my kid to marry someone Asian. These are facts. Church don't like talking about these things, but it's true. As black, I could talk about it because church was nowhere for black people in 50s, 60s. So I could be frank. Church was nowhere for us, so I can speak clear. People feel these things, but in church, again, we don't care about your culture. I say it harsh so that people can stop. Everyone liked their parents, how they're cooked better than anyone else. But when you come to a potluck, guess what? I mean, that's your last name like that so much. Unless somebody is a standout cook, what we gonna say? You know, it was good because we don't want to hurt your feelings. But what do we prefer? Your culture food, right? Of course. So then come on. So these are facts. So sometimes you have two Christian parents, but how come I don't hear a Christian talking about kids in terms of future? Because to Nadine's point, yes, especially now in multicultural setting and people from all over the world, you could find you a Boaz, but he may not look and feel like what you thinking in your mind, right? You could find you a Ruth, but she may not look and feel like what you thinking in your mind. So that's a good point in terms of expectations, right? Because when the rubber hits the road, you need somebody who's going to be a partner. Oh, right? Because being a partner have nothing to do with looks, or I like the same movie, or I'm the same race. Somebody who can lift you up when you fall down. Oh, take a poll of how many people married and say, hey, how many people married right now feel like they have a partner? I dare not ask raise hand because people say, I got a spouse. I got a wedding ring on, but I don't feel like I have a partner. See, you got people married 20, 30, 100 years and still ain't feel like they got a partner yet. Look. So again, people's mindset, don't tell me about arranged marriages. Don't tell me about culture. Everywhere in the world is the same. Tell me about spiritual heart. Because just this next chapter, when it starts talking about going to Jesse's house, right, for Samuel to find out who God anointed a king, what did Jesse do as a dad? He started parading all his sons. And what? God said, not him. Samuel said, not him. God said, not him. Samuel said, not him. Samuel said, what at the end? You sure you don't got no other kids? Because God sent me here. And what did he say? Well, we got this little kid who's in the field. He only like animals, though, so we don't really pull him around. And what was God's point? That people judge from what they can see. But I judge where? From their heart. And that young boy playing in the dirt is going to grow up to be a man after my own heart. He's going to literally strive to replace his heart with my heart. But he didn't see that physically because this is just a little kid playing in the dirt. So when we start talking about spiritual genealogy, you need to pick a spouse that will be aligned with how you see raising your child. Or sometimes you don't, but you have a dominant personality, male or female. Because I've seen some females who've raised kids in the church and their spouse is not around. And the spouse know what? You can be the head of the household every day except for Sunday morning. Because Sunday morning we go into church. I've seen women do that. Is that difficult? Gotta be. But she put her foot down. And what do the guy do? He don't say nothing because he know if he make us say, her and them kids is what? In the wind. So I've seen that. I've seen men who have spouses who aren't in Christ and they let it be known what? Every day you can plan something for us as a family, but on Sunday morning, we going to worship. I seen that with my own eyes. Is that easy? No, that gotta be hard. So when we start looking at sacrifice, you can see people in your congregation or sister congregations around that have made that sacrifice. But the question is, are we willing to make that sacrifice for us? That's why when we start talking about life as staircase, right? So our couples that are newly married who don't have kids, y'all need to be talking about that. See, you need to make sure that you and your spouse on the same page before a child get here. How do you view yourself raising this kid? And if you start telling me about basketball, football, soccer, cheerleading, I want him to be a professional video game player, all these things, and you thinking, oh, I was thinking Sunday school, camp, youth rally, y'all don't mesh. See, you don't mesh because you thinking spiritual thing and the spouse thinking physical thing. And Paul said the spiritual mind and the flesh mind is what? At war with one another. Now the kid gonna raise what? Confused. How I should be. So these things matter when we start talking about raising Boaz and Ruth, picking Boaz and Ruth, and also producing, right? The next generation. Look how hard church is. That's why church is a lifestyle. If you feel like you just go to church and go home, this is not a country club. We're trying to change the way we live based off the pages of the Bible, but it's hard. It's hard. We don't admit it's hard enough. People make church seem easy. That's why I said, take some humble pie and start this Sunday and write what you did wrong this week and put it in the basket because we pretend like we didn't sin. Did everyone in here sin in the last week? Yes, we sinned in the last 5 minutes, probably. Some of us sinning in this Bible study right now. So how come we don't say? When you go, I say all the time, the analogy, when you go to the hospital and you shot, and you in the ER, and the doctor saying, what? Let me see your wound. And you saying, what? No, I'm embarrassed. Well, sweetheart, everyone in here bleeding. Look around. Everyone's sick. Everyone that comes to church sinned. But we acting like, oh, I don't want to show my sin. Why? Because I'm embarrassed. But you all are sinners. Yeah, but I don't want to show. We got to be more showing so people can see, oh, other families in here struggling financially too. Other families in here struggling spiritually too. Other families in here struggling with raising bad kids too. If you got a bad kid, just say, hey, my kid is bad. Because parents who have a bad kid, they would love to tell you about their bad kid. Even if it's just blowing off steam. They're like, let me tell you about my bad kid. Just hear me out. These are the things that we have as a resource, as a church family, that we don't tap into enough, because when you just go to church and you come back home, therefore you don't view those things as communal. That's why when you have some cultures say it takes a village to raise a child, that means that when you looking out your project window and you see someone else's child being bad, you can spank them. That's what that mindset means. But that's long gone in culture now, right? That's long gone. People feel like it don't take a village to raise a child. I'll do it by myself. But how? How, when you never raised a kid, you're going to raise a kid? You need to reference those matriarchs and patriarchs either in your family or in another family to help you. So when the New Testament says the older should teach the younger, that's what it means. When Solomon mentions things like, hey, this concept of youth, when this last chapter of Ecclesiastes is wasted on young people. That's why you should remember God, what he said, what? When you're old or young? When you're young, so that by the time you get old, you will forget everything, but you'll still remember Jesus Christ. That's the type of life that we need to be living. And anybody at any stage of your life, you can switch. Rahab did, right? You can switch. Ruth did. Any moment of your life, you can say, you know what? I'm going to start being a better person. I'm literally going to be a better person. I've seen people do that in the world for financing like you never believe. Somebody who literally was homeless and made a sacrifice and is a millionaire. That's a sacrifice. We love to see, wow, I like to have $1 million. But would you be willing to go through the transition that that person did? A lot of us is no. A lot of us will say, yes, I would like to have the $1 million if someone gave it to me. But the person going to say, what? Nobody gave me anything. I was homeless. So when we look at these situations, this topic is faith living righteously. We got to look at it as, are we willing to put the work in? Whether single, married, parents, spouse one to another, church family, physical brothers and sisters, are we willing to put the work in so that we can be better people individually? Work out our own salvation in fear and trembling. That's the question. Right? This Bible study that is the question for you in your life. Will you leave here and say, I'm going to be a better, whatever category you fall in? Or are you going to say, what? No, I'm just going to be the way I am. It's too hard. You don't know my family, blah, blah, blah. What did Jesus say about moving a mountain? If you have faith, you could say this mountain go here, there. But already when I'm saying moving mountain, if you thinking that's crazy, what? You can't do it. That's why when people left, said, oh, this hard preaching, I don't know what he talking about. Jesus looked at his friends and said, what? You going to leave with them? And what did they say? Where are we going? Maybe Jesus asking us today, you going to leave? Some of us are about to say, yeah, I'm going to leave. I'm not going to make it to December 31st. Jesus is going to say, what? Go ahead then. Because did Jesus stop them from leaving? No. Why he didn't stop them? Hey, I'm about to die for your sins. See, why Jesus didn't chase after them? He said, y'all going to leave too? Because each person have to make up their own mind if they want to be a good person or not. You could be surrounded by all the goodness in the world, but you got to decide for yourself. You're going to adhere to your mom or your grandmother, your father and grandfather's warning, or you're going to go out and blaze your own trail. You say, I'm going to blaze my own trail. Prodigal son, father did what? Let him go. Did he chase him? No, because I got another son I got to raise and worry about. So those are the things we have to think about. That's why this type of Bible study is everybody, because you may not even be married, but you may be a person that's not a Boaz or a Ruth. Why not? Oh, I was raised by bad parents. You in church now. You can go tap into someone else's family and be raised properly. So think about those things. Yes,
I was just getting ready to say that. So Ruth and Boaz, they were more than just nice people in spite of their background. Actually, I think it was their background that led them to where they were. And a lot of parents who have not done right in their own life will say to their children, I don't ever want you to be this, or I don't ever want you to be that, or don't do this or don't do that, because out of that will come destruction of your life, right? So it's being honest with your children, telling them the things that the path you do not want them to go down and why. The next part of that is the obedience of the child. But then there's the spiritual component, because you can have individuals that don't go down the same path, but the spiritual component is, okay, now I need to go a step beyond just being a nice person. I need really, it's the spiritual component that's going to guide my life, right? Because we got a lot of nice non-Christian people, right? And that happens every day. But now, how do I allow God to navigate my path and order my steps? That's a little more challenging, right? Because in the midst of that, there are going to be lonely times. In the midst of that, you may feel like you're alone. In the midst of that, you are separated from other people. Yeah. And so for Ruth and for Boaz, I look at them as, and I love this story because I think we all, as women, should be Ruth, and as men, should be Boaz, right? And Boaz had a responsibility, and he wasn't just a Christian, right? Being a Christian didn't make him a Boaz, right? I mean, he had a lot going for himself. He was well respected. He was wealthy. He did a lot in the community. He was able to take care of Ruth, right? You could be
and Naomi.
And Naomi. So you can think, well, if I'm just a Christian, right? And so he's a Christian, she's a Christian. So maybe we'll call them Ruth and Boaz, but it goes so much deeper than that. God calls us to do other things, not just being that, but then look how he calls us to take care of our families as a Boaz. Look how he calls us to take care of our families as Ruth, right? These are hard things because you don't know the outcome. But if you trust God, this is where the faith part comes in. You know he's going to take care of it. And I think it's hard for us to even consider ourselves as women being a Ruth and as men being a Boaz. It takes a lot of work.
A lot of pressure too to be that good or to be perceived as that good. So yeah, everyone had good comments. Anyone else before we close? Good comments. Always think about that culturally, right? The way I look at drugs and alcohol is different because of my family, right? If you want to ask me about that, I look at drugs and alcohol way different because of my family. Maybe you don't look at it that way, but because of my family's culture, see, I look at it differently. We look at life differently based off of how we were raised. And then when you start to talk about spiritual things, there's comments that I make or situations that I'm in or advice or anything that I give that's different than maybe you is because when we went to Trumbull, I was just a baby. See? So think of it that way, right? Just imagine you always was in church since 1 year old. Wouldn't you think different? Yes. Does it mean I'm perfect? No. But it does mean that the way I view things are different, right? When you start talking about the people that I know, like Sister Cindy knew me from nothing, right? Sister Nadine knew me from nothing. I can go on and on, Sister Beulah, right? Maybe you just came to Bridgeport. But so then obviously we're going to be different because these things are genealogy and takes time, right? Nothing is overnight. I wish we could be baptized and come out and be Jesus Christ perfect, but it takes a lifetime. It takes time. Okay, we have 2 books left. Anybody want to take these? You can have them for yourself or give to someone else. I'll leave them on the back table if you want. These you can have. We have the books here, so we'll give them out at the end of worship. We have these the year 2, so just make sure you bring in these ones for year 2. Thanks for Brother David and Brother Ellis that was helping put these together, and who else put these together. Much appreciated. So next week we'll get into these. So just make sure you grab one of these before you go. We'll bring extra ones next week. But if you want to have these, we have 2 left. No need to keep them. So anyone can have it. Yeah, we get one here. Anybody else want to have? Boom. Now it's gone. If you need these, we can bring more. But I don't have any more to give because I'm not Jesus with the loaves and the fish. I can't make the books appear. But if you need more, let us know. Okay, we're over time, well over. Let's have a quick prayer, and then we'll transition into our worship service. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this beautiful, blessed day. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to discuss this concept of living righteously as a family, as married couples, as parents, as siblings one to another, as single people, as older individuals, as widows, as grandparents and grandfathers, grandmothers, every aspect of our life. We pray that something could have been grasped from this story of Boaz and Ruth and their lineage and their family before they got on the scene and who they were able to raise and produce afterwards. We pray that we will put forth, seek first the kingdom and its righteousness, for we know that if we do those things in proper order, that all these other physical things will be added to us in its due time. We know from your Son that no one that walks this earth that denies mother, father, sister, brother, and loved ones and physical things for you and live a life worthy to the calling will not be blessed in this life and the next to come. Per Jesus' response to Peter. So we're thankful for these truths. We pray that we're able to glean something from this lesson today to inspire us to be better, to go into our individual homes, culture, neighborhood as one church body here, and be able to start being the change that we would like to see in others and around us. As we transition into worship, we pray that you be with those who are traveling without the loss or harm of any. Be with those brothers who will be leading us as they will be facilitating our worship service. We pray that all things will be done in spirit and in truth. And we pray that this worship service will be presented up to you, a sweet smelling aroma to thy throne. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. Thank you for all of our commenters and Bible readers. Much appreciated. All of our baptized men, before we do the books or the bulletin, if you can come out, we'll have a quick prayer and then we'll get right to it and praise God.